Welcome, Hallie with Handmade by Hallie. Welcome to my next video. For this project, we will need a Dollar Tree water bowl. We will need a paint scraper, some scissors, optional cardboard, some joint compound that's ready to use, a sponge, and a cup with water. Let's get started on this project. I will also use a turntable and a mat to keep my table clean. First thing I'm going to do is use a sharp tool to cut off the top of that water bowl. Even it out with the scissors as best you can. Then I'm going to glue the water bowl into the bottom, and then I'm going to take some extra packing paper that I have hanging around and put that into the bottom of the bowl. This is going to be the foot, and I'm going to use some painter's tape or some masking tape to hold that paper in place. And that bowl does want to come up, so I will go back and add some more tape and more glue here in a minute. We want that to stay in place really good. And as you can see, as we're working on this, I have filled the sides on both sides and the front with some cardboard. That's an optional part of this project. It really doesn't matter in the end for this one if you put that extra cardboard in. Now we are ready to make this into a boot. Now I have my ready to use joint compound, and at first I thought I wanted to use a paintbrush and quickly decided no, I want to use my paint scraper to take the joint compound and spread that all over my plastic. And this joint compound has no problem sticking to the plastic. So we just dip into the bucket and get some on there. It's kind of like frosting a cake, if you've ever done that. It's kind of what this reminds me of. Just, we're not going for even, we just need to get everything covered. We will go back later and smooth this out. If your joint compound gets a little too thick, you can water it down just a little bit, but don't do it too much. If you do too much, then during the drying process, the joint compound can kind of run off. I've had that problem before and had to take it off and completely redo it. So we're just going to make sure to cover everything really good. And especially on the front here where we've got the paper, this will take at least 24 hours to 48 hours to completely dry. Sometimes that front part, the more of the joint compound I put on there and the wetter that it gets, the longer it takes to dry. And when this is dried, it's nice and hard. It doesn't seem to crack or flake off. You just want to make sure that you put enough on there. And sorry, you see my elbow and the side of my head there. I wanted to make sure that you got a good view of what I was doing. So I'm going to go back and add another layer around the top, making sure that there's enough of the joint compound. And I am taking out some of the clumps that I've found in there. And then when I am done with this part, making sure that everything is covered, we're going to smooth it out with the sponge. And so I dip my sponge into the water and we smooth it out, and kind of scrape off the extra onto my covered surface. And I am wearing gloves for this because this tends to get messy. And this way I don't make my hands all messy. So I just keep repeating this process of dipping my sponge into the water, wiping up so that everything doesn't kind of slough off, or wiping around and making sure that everything is nice and smooth as we can get it. This process probably takes about 15-20 minutes. I do see one spot where the tape is sticking up, so I add a little bit more of the compound, and I'll come back and smooth that out here in a minute. You want to make sure that everything is covered. We are going to paint this, but we don't want to see any of the blue tape or any of the paper. The next things we'll need are some flowers and some greenery. We're going to use a couple different ribbons, a couple different colors of paint, and I'm going to do a base coat of white paint and do 2 coats of that. Make sure that covers everything really well. Then I'm going to cut a piece of this green, I think this is at Hobby Lobby, kind of in the train section or in the floral section, and I just turned that upside down and traced that pattern. I did forget to tell you, I did put sand in the bottom of my boot and some gaps and cracks, and then have cut that off even at the top, and I've put that in with some floral pins. Now we're going to do the tedious part of putting some narrow tape onto the boot, as we are going to make some stripes. And so I do the first stripe, and then I'm going to take some smaller pieces of the tape and cut a couple pieces and put that underneath as a guide for how far apart I want these to be. The other option of using this narrow tape would be to use the blue painter's tape that comes in about 1-inch sections. This did end up being a little bit more tedious than I had planned on being because it is very narrow. I do take off that guide tape and use that over and over again. Sorry about seeing the top of my head. I'm just re-putting that guide tape underneath that row of tape we just put in there. And then I'm just going to keep going around and around. And when I get to a different portion, I do add a different piece and kind of pinch it and gather it to make it turn. The straighter your lines, the better that it will look, and you want to make sure to press that tape down really, really well, trying not to let any paint get underneath the tape. That'll mean for less cleanup later. It's kind of like using a stencil. The more prep you do and the better you do the prep, the better your painting project goes. So we're going to get this row done, and again I kind of pinched that tape as we're going around, making sure it's the same distance. So these stripes will look pretty nice. Now that this part is done, we're going to take those guide pieces off. I'm going to put one in the center there and then gauge it from the side. Again, kind of pinching it as it has to turn. Now that we have that done, we are going to paint our first color. And I have this pre-mixed custom purple. So I'm going to put this on, and I'm going to do 2 coats of this purple, making sure it dries all the way in between coats. And after the second coat, if I take the tape off while it's wet, I can smear the wet paint onto the white. And I don't want to do that. Just make sure to cover everything really well. Again, 2 coats of the purple, and then we'll move on and take off the tape. And I just use the end of my X-Acto knife to peel up the end of the tape. Now we're going to make some stripes going up and down our project. And I didn't feel that I needed any guide tape. I could kind of eyeball it as I was going, making sure to press the tape down. And after we get this side done, we're going to go over to the other side and repeat that. Then I'm going to start one down the front, approximately in the middle. Pull that across and keep going down the front and down the front of the boot. And then I have to fill in the gap there, so it takes me a minute to figure out which way I want my tape to go. We're just going to follow our same design, or the way the tape is making that stripe on the front. And this does take a little bit more finesse in filling in some of the gaps any way that looks good to you. So I repeat what I do on one side, I do on the other side. So that's what I'm doing here. And again, make sure to press all the edges of your tape down. One of the hard things about the texture is when it dries, when the boot dries, that compound leaves a few cracks here and there, and those are hard to put the tape over. So now that we have this all down, we are going to do 2 coats of our custom pink and then take the tape off. Now that this is all painted, I think it looks really pretty good. So the next thing I'm going to do is take a 1-inch ribbon and cut a piece big enough to go on the bottom of the boot. And this is going to be the sole of the boot, like you see on a shoe. And so that's why those indentations on the side and front, filling in with the cardboard, doesn't really matter for this project. If you're going to do a Santa boot with this or some other kind of boot, you might want to fill in those extra gaps with the cardboard. But we're just putting this 1-inch ribbon on, and I do put my finger protector on because this ribbon is a cotton ribbon, and that glue just goes right through the cotton as I'm pushing the ribbon down into the glue. Being careful not to get any of my other fingers in that glue. And just now we're just going to put the glue on the inside of the plastic and just fold that over. I do find an extra piece of the compound that's gone underneath the boot, and so I just cut that out of the way. Now I am making 2 handles, and I've cut about a 10-inch piece of jute rope and a piece of that white ribbon, fold it over the edges, put glue down the center. Then I'm going to cut off the wired edges because this makes it easier to wrap around. Then put some glue and wrap around one side. Kind of tricky not to get your fingers into the glue as you're doing this part, but that's why I've got the finger protectors on there. And then I do glue for the other side. And because I've cut the wired edges, you get some fraying, and I'll come back and clean that up later. Now once I get these done, I do wish that I had made these maybe an inch or 2 shorter, but I think they turned out cute. So the end of the ribbon I left open to put glue on and use that to glue onto the top of the boot. And use my fingers to hold those down. And we're going to cover those with this pink ribbon. So I'm going to cut a piece of pink ribbon, finish one edge, put some glue on the top edge, and put that around the top of the boot so that kind of finishes the top of the boot. And the edges of the handles do go down just a little bit further than this narrower ribbon. So I do end up cutting a smaller piece of the pink to finish covering that, so it just has a finished look. So just cut a couple matching pieces, put some glue on, and then finish covering. And in the end, when I get all the greenery and florals in here, the height of the handles really doesn't matter. So here I have some grass stems that I have put in with some picks, dipped it in my glue pot, and I used my needle nose pliers to get that down into the center. And sometimes, rather than grabbing that stem with the hot glue with my fingers, I just use my needle nose pliers. When I get some of these other greens in, I kind of pull them apart so that they're not all stuck together. And just keep going around. And I like to put my piece that I'm working on onto a turntable so it's easy to look at all the different sides. This one isn't necessarily designed to be seen from all the sides, although it is filled all the way around. There aren't really any empty spots when I get done. So I'm just going to keep filling with this tall leafy green. I'm going to put in the other 2 pieces of grass to add some different texture and different color. Then we're going to look at our florals. And what you're not seeing is off to my left-hand side is I have my glue pot all ready to go. So I'm just taking my flowers, trimming them to the right length, and just dipping them in the glue. You could use a hot glue gun, but a glue pot is quicker when you're doing florals. And so I just keep spinning my boot around to see where I need to fill. And I really like these variegated purple flowers with the daisies. I think they look really cute in the pink and purple painted boot. And we're just kind of evenly spreading our flowers all around, trimming the ends where I need to. And just keep filling till I've used all my flowers. Now I am going to as you'll see here in a minute, I am going to leave a hole in the front, and as we're looking at it, it'll be on the right hand side. And I'm leaving that hole there on purpose, as I'm going to put a bow there. It doesn't have to be a large bow, but I'm going to put a bow there. So I'm going to fill in a couple small extra pieces of green, and I do trim off some of the leaves, because those leaves, when I dip it into the glue, will melt and they will get really, really hot. That's how you burn yourself when you're doing florals, is sticking in your fingers into the glue and the greens that have melted. So now that our flowers are in there, we're going to make a bow, and we're going to use this variegated ribbon that's about 1.5 inches wide. I'm going to do 3 loops on each side, and I do see where they've spliced the ribbon, so I cut that out, put my ribbon back in there, do one last loop. I have an extra piece of white, so I'm going to put that in, and then put this narrower light pink. And this narrower ribbon, I do like to do longer tails because they're fun to curl. I have a piece of the extra green that I put underneath my zip tie. And then I'm going to use a piece of pipe cleaner to cover my zip tie. Twist that tight. And then we can use that piece of green like a pick and make that easy to put right into our spot that we want. So now we're just going to fluff our bow and make it look nice. And then I'm going to trim the tails. And then our project is done. So if you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't do all those things, like it, comment, follow, turn on your notifications, and even share. I would greatly appreciate it. So here is our finished project, all ready to go. Thank you so much for watching.